The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
In the course of his teaching, Jesus said to the crowds, "Beware of the scribes who like to go around in long robes and accept greetings in the marketplaces, seats of honor in synagogues, and places of honor at banquets. They devour the houses of widows and as a pretext recite lengthy prayers. They will receive a very severe condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and observed how the crowd put money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow also came and put in 2 small coins worth a few cents. Calling his disciples to himself, he said to them, "Amen, I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the other contributors to the treasury. For they all have contributed from their surplus wealth, but she, from her poverty, has contributed all she had, her whole livelihood." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Peter, you always give me the eye when I walk toward you. So by now, you have become accustomed to the fact that we no longer do collections. Just 4 times a year, because we have assessed collections by the diocese and we have to have a certain amount or we have to pay it. So we have put collection boxes at the entrances of the church because, let's be honest, you don't need somebody waving a basket in front of your nose. You're going to give what you give. But the church is built on the same model as the temple. And in the temple precincts of the temple, there were collection receptacles, but they were made of metal, and they were these huge trumpet-like containers. And so when people put in money, you would heard this. So Jesus, who's sitting in the temple precinct across from the treasury, is watching people put in money. And some of the rich people are putting in large sums of money. And this is what you heard. And then this woman comes with 2 small copper coins, and she goes like this. And Jesus said that she put in more than all the others. Now let's kind of take a step back and think about that for a second. Because in reality, what I want you to understand is that this is not about money. This has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with faith. It has everything to do with faith. Now, in the first reading this morning, there is a dialogue that takes place between the prophet Elijah, and remember, the prophet is God's mouthpiece. God speaks through the prophet. And so there's a dialogue that's going on between Elijah the prophet and this widow. And it's a significant thing that he is speaking to a widow, because widows back then had no social standing. They were at the mercy of everybody. She's got a young son who's not of legal age, and so she's responsible to take care of him, but who's taking care of her? And so Elijah the prophet has been at the wadi where God told him to go, and he said, go there and don't worry about food because the ravens are going to feed you, the birds are going to feed, they're going to bring you food. And he, in obedience, he goes. And then God says to him, it's time for you to leave the wadi, and now you're going to go to Zarephath. And just as you enter the city, you're going to encounter this widow. So out of obedience to God, Elijah makes haste. And he gets to the entrance of the city, and just as God said to him, he encounters this widow who's picking up a few sticks. And then begins the dialogue. And he says to her, excuse me, can you get me a cup of water? She says, no problem. So she sets off to get him the cup of water. And as she's going, he says to her, oh, by the way, can you bring me a small cake? And she says, well, I was on my way to make my son and myself our last meal before we die, because we only have just a little bit of oil in the jug and just a little bit of flour left. And Elijah says to her, have no fear. Go and do as you set out to do. But first, he said, bring me something to eat. When I read that and prayed with it, it stopped me dead in my tracks. Because I think you and I need to think and take pause for a moment how you and I would respond to being told when we're down to our last $5. That's all you got between you and poverty is $5. And someone says to you, can you get me a drink of water? And you say, sure, no problem. And you set off on your way. And as you go, they say, can you bring me a sandwich? And you say, well, you know what? I don't have any. And by the way, I was on my way with my last $5 to buy my last meal. Because that's all the money I've got. And that person says to you, I know, but can you feed me first? How would you respond to that? And it's a serious and it's a valid question. How would I, how would you, how would we respond to that question? Can you feed me first? Because how I necessarily respond to that question necessarily determines the kind of faith that I have. Do I trust and do I believe that God is going to provide for me, that He's going to take care of me? This is why is deceiving. Looks are deceiving. You see, Jesus is sitting across the temple treasury and he's watching the rich people put in large sums of money that make a lot of noise. And so it has the appearance that you're giving a lot. That you're giving a lot. And this poor widow gave 2 small copper coins worth a couple of pennies. And she put everything she had into the temple treasury. And Jesus said she gave more than everybody else put together. Now, if you think that Jesus is watching them do this, he could care less about this. It ain't about the money. He's not watching the money go into the treasury. He's watching what's coming out of their hearts. Is it a pure gift? Is it a sacrificial gift? In other words, does it hurt? That's what sacrificial giving is. It's supposed to hurt. is supposed to sting somewhat. This is why Jesus said the rich people who gave large sums of money, they gave from their surplus wealth. I mean, what's $100 if you're making 10 grand a week? You see what I'm saying here? And there are people who are making that kind of money. What are they doing with the rest of it? See, here's the thing that I think you and I should stop and think about for a moment, which gives us pause, and why it stopped me dead in my tracks. Because I don't know if I have the kind of faith to do what this woman did. I don't know if I have the kind of faith to if I'm down to my last, whatever it is that I'm down to my last of, and someone says, can you take care of me first? I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I would do it. I'd like to think that my faith would make me take that leap of faith, all right? But it's like martyrdom, you know? I don't want to go there. I'm too much of a coward. Could I? Would I? Here's the other piece to this puzzle that we need to ponder and think about for a moment. One of the things that I know as an American, having grown up in this land of plenty, is that I'm not accustomed to inconvenience, and neither are most of us. See, in reality, when I'm hungry, I go to my refrigerator, and there's food in there. When I'm thirsty, I turn the faucet on, and there's water. When I'm cold, I turn the thermostat up. When I'm hot, I put the air conditioning on. When I'm tired, I go to a nice, comfortable bed. You know how it goes, and I could keep on giving you examples. We American people, we are not accustomed to inconvenience. Have you noticed the grocery shelves lately? Have you noticed when you go to the grocery store, some of the things that were plentiful aren't so plentiful anymore? Some of those shelves are naked. For goodness sakes, I can remember when you couldn't even buy any toilet paper. Remember that? We're not accustomed to inconvenience, my brothers and sisters. And yet, now the supply chain, we're being told, is backing up. And how do we fix this thing that's becoming broken? So what are we going to do in our inconvenience? How are we going to respond when others approach us and say, can you take care of me? How will I respond? Can I respond? And in reality, what God is calling upon all of us to do is to be generous. Not to give from our surplus, but to give from our want, to give from our need. Because when you look at the cross, that's what you see. God gave everything. God gave everything. And now he looks to me and asks, what are you going to give in return? You see, the truth of the matter is that we have become accustomed to compartmentalizing our lives. This is for God, this is for me, this is for you, this is for me. This part of my life you can have, O Lord, but this part is still for me. Compartmentalization is not a part of heaven. See, whatever it is that I'm withholding, whatever it is that I have not given over, whatever it is that I can't give yet, that's what God is showing me that is not yet ready for the glory of heaven. This is why it ain't about this. This is just a means to an end. God doesn't care about money. He cares about you. He cares about me. All this is a means of exchange to take care of each other. I think this is what the message is. It's about faith. It's about asking myself to take a step back. Can I respond in the same way that that woman responded to Elijah the prophet? And remember, God was speaking through that prophet. He was God's mouthpiece. And said to her first, don't be afraid. The jar of oil will not run dry. The flour will not run out. And the scripture says that they were able to eat for 1 whole year. That's 12 months. In biblical numerology, the number 12 symbolizes and represents fullness and completeness. That because this woman responded in faith, that she did what God was telling her to do through the prophet, because she took care of him, God took care of her. It's not about money. It's about how much of myself I've turned over to the Lord, and how much of myself that I've not yet been able to.